Welcome to the June 7th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. We've delayed just a few minutes. We have a quorum, so we can continue on, but we are expecting one of the other members to be here as well. So we'll go ahead and start. We may have a member coming in just a little bit later. The first item on the agenda will invite the public as well as ourselves to stand and cite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is attendance. Mr. Day, would you do be so kind?
Yes. Andy Patel? Not present. Larry Jones? Present. Chris Lake? Not present. Steve Mundy?
Present.
Kathy Pottsway?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the May 3rd, 2023 minutes. Those were in our packet of information. Are there any corrections or questions about those minutes? If there are none, would someone kindly motion that we approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. Thank you, Mr. Jones. You may get tired of that tonight. All those in favor of approval of the May minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Before we begin with the agenda, is there anyone here who is anticipating asking for a continuance that we are not aware of at this point? We are aware that there have been some formal requests for continuances. None? Okay. The first item then is docket number 2023-11-DSV M. Hollis at 10550 Pete Dye Ridge in Zionsville. This petition they have requested a continuance to the July meeting. That would be July. Someone already has it. Let me know. July the 5th. They've requested a continuance to the July 5th to give themselves a little more time to get their petition in order. If there are no objections, would someone make a motion to continue that?
Move to continue docket number 2023-11-DSV to the meeting of July 5th.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That will be continued to the July meeting. Next item is docket number 2023-19-DSV L. Buching, 10525 Pete Dye Ridge in Zionsville. The petitioner has requested a withdrawal of that petition. If there are no objections, would someone make a motion that we accept the withdrawal of that motion or that petition?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries and it is withdrawn. Next is docket number 2023-13-DSV. That is the negative finding of facts. Those were included in your packet, and we need a motion to adopt those negative findings if there are no questions about them.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we may have skipped 2023-05 DSV, top of
Another withdrawal.
right. Top of page.
That is not on my.
Oh, okay, that was on the new agenda.
Okay.
Brief
All right.
addition.
We will go back to that one then. We have approved, though, the adoption of the negative findings of facts on 2023-13-DSV. We'll move then to petition number 2023-05-DSV, a withdrawal request letter from D. Fleener, that's at 10663 Barrington Way. And that, again, is a request for a withdrawal of that petition. So there are no questions on it. I entertain a motion.
So moved? Or do
Thank
we
you,
have to
Mr.
actually make a
Jones.
motion?
That's the withdrawal of petition 2023-05-DSV. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Mrs. Postlethwaite. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. It is withdrawn. The next item is docket number 2023-15-DSV. E. Grassi, 3963 Club Bridge Estates in Zionsville, and that's adoption of the negative findings of facts. It was included in your packet. If there's no questions, is there a motion to adopt those finding of facts?
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Second?
second,
Thank you, Mrs. Postlethwaite. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is adopted. Next is docket number 20. I'm sorry. It was on mine. It's just a different order.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's further down. That's all the easy ones. The rest of them will require a little work. The next item under continued business is docket number 2023-16-DSV. George Jezewski at 365 West Cedar Street, Zionsville, Indiana. This is continued from the May 3rd, 2023 meeting as a petition for development standard variance to provide for a home addition which 1 deviates from lot coverage, 2 deviates from the aggregate side setbacks, 3 memorializes an existing side yard setback of the single family residential home in the urban village zoning districts RV. Staff, could we have that report?
Yes, thank you. And first, I will like to just note a procedural change that we're doing going forward. And as far as the staff presentations, we're also going to be providing some exhibits like the aerial site plans, that sort of thing, to benefit you all to be able to see it and also the public. So with that said, if IT could get that up, it'd be appreciated. Awesome. As was stated, this petition was continued from last month. The petitioner is proposing to construct a 150 square foot, 1-story addition to the east side of the property to accommodate for a bedroom addition. The proposed addition will necessitate a variance of the aggregate side and the lot coverage. Going to the site plan, the proposed addition is to be 5 feet from the east side, and the existing west side setback of the residence is 3 feet. Thus, this would make the aggregate 8 feet, not meeting the 15-foot aggregate. Also, with the addition, we'll bring the lot coverage to 40%. The permitted lot coverage here would be 37% due to the existing brick paver patios. Lastly, there is a request to memorialize the existing side yard setback on the west side, which the residence is 3 feet from the property line. The request in excess of lot coverage and aggregate is not uncommon in the RV district, given the unique historical characteristics of the property, along with the scale and placement of the existing improvements. Staff is favorable of both requests. Now to follow up from last month's meeting, there you can see the elevations. The petitioner was going to get a survey to kind of verify the property lines, because I think there was some concerns from adjacent neighbors about where the property line was. The petitioner was able to find some pins, as you can see from, I think, 2 different surveyors on this site plan. So they're still within the same request and wanting to meet that 5-foot setback. So this is the updated site plan with the pins. These are annotated where the pins were, and there's photos further on. And I think this is a neighbors survey that the petitioner provided. And then lastly, these are the photos of where the pin locations are. So that's just kind of follow up from the last month's meeting. From staff's perspective, I think this meets what the concerns were stated last month. With that said, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, let me ask now, do we have any online participants? We do, all right. And if you would let me know if there is one who wishes to speak at the appropriate time, thank you. If there are no questions from staff, is the petitioner's representative here? If you would come to the podium, state your name, and then provide us with any details that might be helpful for us to understand.
Yeah, good evening, Mark Peters, architect, 6995 Covington Street, Lebanon. I'm working for our client, George Stephen Gorgievsky. Last month, we met with you and you thought you would be in favor of the 3 deviations from standards. The question we all had was, okay, we've got the property, the lot, the pins. Do we know exactly where the property lines are? And I left that meeting and went to work. We did have one certified civil survey from Han Civil Group for the property on the east side that had property pins set at the sidewalk in the rear of the property. And then just about that same week, we had in the exhibit package is the one just before that, item number 2, that was done by Steppenworth on May the 5th of this year, and it notes 4 parcels and 4 certified property pins located. And I took pictures and identified the pins and the locations. And then these last couple of pictures is from string lines and measurements that I, as an architect, put back on page 1 to say, from the east property line, I can say that we have established the setback, and our proposed addition is going to be 10'8", and we are about 2 inches short of the, not short, but back from the required 5-foot easement. And so my point is we feel very confident this meets the requirements, certified by several surveyors and a conglomeration of what I've put together. We did reach out to Han and a couple of people to what would it cost for us to do a site survey of this. And Han, who'd just done the neighbor, said, well, you can do it for $3,900, but it'll take 7 to 9 weeks. So we felt that this information was good. So I met with Suzanne and I said, this is what we got. And she said, we'll take that, present it, and see what the board thinks. So I would hope you find this in good favor so we can proceed with our home addition.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Do you know have you or has the petitioner met with the neighbor who was concerned about this? And do they now understand what you've done, and are they satisfied with it?
Yes, Stephen has talked to Mr. Lewis, and he said, we've answered your question. We will be behind the setback line. And he said, I did that a conversation. This residence is out of state and he lives out of state. So Stephen mows his grass and this and that, and he does not have it in writing. But if that's a requirement to have that in writing, I might still ask you approve it pending something in your hand saying it's okay from Mr. Lewis that we proceed. But I think we've answered the question. His question was make sure you're behind the setback line.
That was the question. Well, if the resident, even though out of state, shows up online and has a question, we'll find out.
Okay.
So, thank you. Any questions for the petitioner's representative?
I think the core of what we were trying to sort out is, was there any type of deed gap between the different parcels? And that's been answered, that it's all very well documented. And secondly, where the house is going to be located, we've documented the setbacks that exist that need the variance, as well as where the new addition is going to be. And the new addition appears to be able to fall within the 5-foot setback. So I think we've kind of clarified all the real questions we had.
Agreed. All right. There are no further questions. Are there any remonstrators? Okay. Can you put them through?
Hi, I'm Tom Lewis, the neighbor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Lewis.
Okay, so all I wanted to do is establish where the center line or the common property line was going to be, and I think Steve has done that to my satisfaction, so I'm good with that, and the setback looks fine to me as well. I do reside in Zionsville, but I do travel an awful lot, so so I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis. If you would state your name and your address, your Zionsville address, please, just for the record. That we've got your name, but not the address.
Yeah, Thomas Lewis III, 345 West Cedar Street, Zionsville, 46077.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, and thank you for that assurance. Are there any other remonstrators who wish to speak for or against this petition? Seeing none, and if there are no further questions from board members, is there a motion?
You want me to go? Okay. Variance number 1. I move that docket 2023-16-DSV development standard variance to provide for an increase in lot coverage to 40% for the bedroom addition for the property located at 365 West Cedar Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RV, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion passes.
All right, variance number 2. I move that docket 2023-16-DSV development standards variance to provide for a deviation of the aggregate side yard setback to 8 feet for the construction of a bedroom addition for the property located at 365 West Cedar Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RVB, approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
And then variance number 3, I move the docket 2023-16-DSV development standard variance DSV to provide for the memorialization of the existing residence and paver patio for the property located at 365 West Cedar Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RVB, approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The petition is approved. Good luck, Mr. Peters. Now to new business. The next item, first item under new business is docket number 2023-17-UV. Montessori Foundation of Indianapolis, 11712 North Michigan Road, Zionsville. Petition for a use variance to provide for a school in the Urban Neighborhood Business Zone District B1 and the Urban Michigan Overlay District MRO. And there is a second docket number, which is 2023-23-DSV. Same petitioner and the same address, and that petition is for a development standard variance to provide for a reduction in the number of required number of parking spaces from 180 to 61 in the Urban Neighborhood Business Zone District B1 and in the Urban Michigan Road Overlay District MRO. We will probably intermingle those two, but let's cover the both, and we'll vote on them separately. So staff, could we have your report, please?
Yes, thank you. And IT, if you could please put my laptop back up. Thank you. The petitioner here at this location is proposing to locate a Montessori school, which is an existing professional office building. The building is 14,000 square feet and has 61 parking spaces. And in this zoning district, the urban neighborhood business does not permit schools, but does align with similar uses such as a daycare, senior living facility, which are both found in the immediate area. As you can see in the comprehensive plan, annotates this area is single family, but since 2003, development on both sides of Michigan Road have been rezoned to the B1 zoning classification, which you can see in the exhibit here. The school use provides a transitional buffer between Michigan Road, commercial and residential uses in the area, and staff is favorable of the use variance request. Going to the development standards request in the required parking reduction, the petitioner will have 45 square feet of classroom space, which requires 180 parking spaces. This comes from one parking space being required per 25 feet of classroom. The parking lot, again, has 61 spaces, 2 which are ADA compliant. The petitioner believes that the 61 spaces will be sufficient for their needs. The number of estimated children will be 105, 35 of them having autism spectrum disorder, which they will have a one-on-one therapist. There will be 50 staff with hours from 8:30 to 4:30. It should be assumed the petitioner has done due diligence that the existing parking at this location is adequate. If the school operation were to expand, it would likely require them to find a larger facility or provide additional parking spaces on site, which most likely would require a development plan approval from the Plan Commission. I think staff did recommend providing some sort of traffic flow or because I know drop off and traffic flows with some schools. To this point, we haven't received that, but would be happy if the petitioner wants to go into that detail. But as far as the parking request, staff is also favorable of that and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I do have a question. I don't remember having seen those numbers. You said 105 students and 50 staff. Is that
105 students and 50 staff.
so that there would be, assuming that the staff members are coming individually, there would be a maximum of 50 parking places that would be taken by staff members.
Correct.
And of support staff. I mean, it's that total staff. That's not just teachers, etc. So,
I would assume that's the entire staff, but that'd be a good question for the petitioner too.
yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for staff?
I guess I do have one other question, and that is, With regard to the traffic study, the dropping off of students in that location, are there any concerns about cars entering and leaving the roadway there as they're dropping off students? Any consideration given to that? Or is that not our problem?
I think it's a consideration you all can have. Is it as far as it being one of the, as far as the parking, I don't think it's directly related to, but correlated, yes. But it's definitely could be something
With regard to the use.
to regard to the use to further.
And the child care center that is located there, do you have an idea how many students or how many children are in care there?
I do not know. But yeah, I know that the child care center is just south of this location.
And the senior care facility also was what I understood.
Yeah, that's pretty
Referring to
much just
the,
across the
In the
street.
neighborhood. I mean, there are other uses that are in proximal to the.
There are two, there's one memory care unit, and then there's another which is assisted living and memory care. And I know that I've read, and my mother was at one of those facilities. There are a few hundred people there, very few drivers, so parking is mostly staff, but
The bigger question would be with the child care center, because that also involves picking up and dropping off children. Probably in hours that are very similar to the school's hours, so.
I think when we have seen requests for those kinds of facilities, again, there's not an influx because people are there permanently, the staff at shift change and so forth. But I think what you're getting at, and I'm interested too, is, and that is how the petitioner plans to have children dropped off and picked up, and so that will, I assume, occur at a fairly confined period of time, morning and afternoon. So,
And they may coincide with the child care center, which I understand is just beside it, or very close to it.
Just to the south.
yeah, I know the childcare there's kind of a stream of cars, if you will, particularly at pickup time, because people start and stop working at different times.
Right,
So
yes.
maybe a little less congested. There are no further questions of staff. Is the petitioner have a representative here? And if you would provide your name and address, please, both of you, I guess, if there's two that are going to be representing the petitioner.
Good evening. My name is John Cross, attorney for the petitioner, here with Vivian Kane. My address is 13 North State Street, Suite 241, Greenfield, Indiana. Before I'll discuss the uses, Ms. Kane will present more details, responses to the questions that have been asked, as well as more specifics about the operations of the school specifically. But to begin by saying that currently petitioner does not own the property. They are under contract to buy it. They do currently operate a Montessori Academy just south of this location. It is the southeast corner of 116th in Michigan Road. And so there is a need for this second location, which she'll speak about more, but the proximity of the two locations is vital to the operations. But without further ado, here's Ms. Kane.
Hello, Vivian Kane, owner of Montessori Foundation of Indianapolis, been existing with Montessori education for about 25 years, and recently have come into a niche with serving autistic children. And there's no other program like this in the country. So I get a lot of emails and calls about what we do, how we do, because it's very unique and it's very innovative. And the location at 116th and Weston Point Drive is been operating there since 2008, and also has a ABA center and a Montessori school. And we have a wait list. And that location at 117th and Michigan Road will be the elementary school only. So right now, the other two previous locations at 75th and Michigan Road and 116th and Michigan Road are all toddler through kindergarten. And so we have that age group where we do have just children with autism. in the same classroom that is inclusive. And so we're bottlenecked where we do not have a place to grow because the elementary is growing bigger. And as you get feeders, between ages of 2 to 6, they need to go to elementary school. So it's very close and very important to have close proximity so those families have a place to go. And so we have 2 feeders into 1 location. And so with it being a ABA center on the first floor, that's where the between 35 therapists, which will have one-on-one with each child that has autism so that they can be inclusive in the classroom, so that minimizes behaviors and give them the support that they need. And then on the upper floor is where we have typical developing children with 2 classrooms, roughly about 32 children, with half being autistic and the other half being typical developing children, so they can pair one-on-one and have peer modeling. And what we found is that with children with autism, in the last 4 years, we've had children that have been nonverbal. Only way to get them to communicate is to have a lamp, which is like a computer that points with objects like a bicycle. You want a bicycle, you want something to eat, you want a donut. And just so pointing and clicking like that. But now they're reading only after being there for like 2 years and speaking full sentences. So the communication and things that we provide to these children are so imperable that they can take care of themselves. They can be educated. They can have life skills and actually have careers, because the ultimate goal is to pair with the state of Indiana, J. Everett Community Center, not community center, but J. Everett educational programs would allow people to go who have high school to get trades in becoming beauticians, becoming culinary arts, so that these children can have a life to be able to take care of themselves, not be a burden, and be financially stable, and have reasonable skills how to interact and be socialized with typical developing peers, showing them as being role models. And so that is the vision that I have for this program and why it's so vital. And then I actually did scale down the size to accommodate for parking. We also have an opportunity to make a U shape so that it flows very nicely, so there's not less bottleneck. And then the daycare that is on to the south of that, their operation hours are like 6 to 6. Our operation hours are 8:30 to 4:30. So it's a little bit later in the day, but it's not as so late in the rush hour when it's like that 5 to 6 trying to get up and down Michigan Road. And then the parents do not park. It's a constant flow. You drop in, you pick up your child, you take them inside, escort them to their classroom. And so most of the parking will be for staff. And so that 35 parking spaces will be for the RBTs, which are the therapists who are one-on-one with the children. And the other support staff will be like Montessori teachers, occupational therapists, OT. So we have a full-fledged support system for these children. And that's where the other dozen or so, including administrative staff, when you come to HR, COOs and CEOs, having office spaces there as well. That would be the headquarters.
Thank you. But there's more, or can we ask questions now?
You can ask questions about a specific business and then I can.
Okay. When you said there's a flow to drop off and pick up, now your hours are 8:30 to 4:30.
Yes, sir.
What time does people start arriving to drop their children off?
Usually around 8:15.
Okay, so it's not a
No.
6 o'clock, but
We have one facility where we start about 8:15 and usually ends about 8:45. So it's like a 30-minute flow, and then about 8:45 it's over.
okay. And you say you have the plans to make a U,
Yes, it's right here. If you'd like to see that or make it part of the document, you can.
and then is the child escorted into the building?
Yes, they're taken out of the cars. Parents do not get out.
Okay,
So the child, just like a regular school, you come up, take your child out and walk them into the classroom. And they always have so therapists are waiting at the doors for each child waiting for their child to come and then escort them from the cars into the building.
any other questions?
So I didn't fully understand. So the parents, it's not the parents that are escorting the children in.
Absolutely not.
It's staff members that are
It's
being,
the staff members are inside waiting at the lobby.
don't get out of the car, they just stop and.
Oh, yeah, just enough to grab your lunch boxes, backpacks, and come inside with the therapist and shut the doors. Same thing at pickup. And pickup is usually 4:30 to about 4:45.
And so are you going to share the drawing with the proposed drive?
Yeah, would you like to put it on the screen? I can show that to you.
Sure.
Okay, there you go.
And the number of parking spaces, while your staff is well under that, are there frequent, I would assume there are somewhat frequent parents that are there for the sake of communicating with the teachers, et cetera?
Very rarely. Those are usually done right around like 3:30-ish, and they're scheduled. So it's not like it's teachers walking into a school building, because it's therapy. So you have a hospital, which is the ABA is a healthcare facility. So people just can't freely walk in. You have to have an appointment. So therefore you control the flow because of HIPAA violations.
Okay, you don't have things like parent-teacher night where,
Oh, if we did have parent-teacher night, we would do it by classrooms. So with the average class being around 30, 32, then we have enough spaces for 30 families and 30 RBTs, but we cut in half because half the class is autistic. So only maybe like 15 children that have ABA therapist.
thank you.
You're welcome.
The existing location, you said there's one at 116th in Michigan.
Yes, right behind Stone Creek Restaurant is a Maria Montessori International Academy and Mindful and Modern ABA Therapies.
It's a little farther south.
Yeah.
And then that has how many students there?
It's about 8,500 square feet, and it encompasses roughly about 100 students.
Hmm.
And we share parking spaces with all the restaurants in front, the spas, the salons, massage therapist. So
Toy store.
tour store, exactly.
And then there's proposed site improvements, basically taking the lawn panel out on what I would call the north side of the building, putting the access drive through there. I think you're going to have to kind of modify the sidewalks up there at the, call it the northeast corner of the building. And then the play center or the playground in the center of that lawn panel.
So you see you're coming out of Michigan Road, coming around
Yeah.
where this is the lawn. We would actually make that a one-way for pass through. So you can have more of a circular enter and exit.
And will you be completing that prior to opening?
Oh, absolutely. That would be one of the projects to be completed. It's imperative. Otherwise you have bottleneck and creating chaos.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Go ahead.
If there is anyone here tonight or anyone online who wishes to speak for or against this petition, now would be the time to do that.
I may make a comment at some point.
Yes, please go ahead.
Just pointing out with this new proposed drive cut or onto, I guess, 421. Or no.
No, it's all on site.
It's all on site. It would most likely require a development plan approval and go before the plan commission to get this approved. So just notifying the petitioner of that.
The additional pavement, has anybody checked to see if there's going to be any kind of lot coverage issues with this site?
It's the first staff has actually seen this
Mm,
exhibit.
okay.
So we would need to examine that and take a look at your question. Number one, but number two, a new drive cut is always a plan commission petition.
But this isn't a drive cut
Yeah.
onto. You're not adding a drive onto
No,
Michigan.
it's
It's just an
actually
internal.
just a patch of grass right now.
It connects there's a parking lot there that kind of views around the building, so this just connects the existing parking lot and pretty much just will encompass the entire building.
Yeah, no, I went out earlier today and drove the site, so I understand, and I was hoping there was something like that there, so. But they're not adding a drive or a curb cut on Michigan.
Thank you for that clarification. To your question regarding lot coverage, I think that additional coverage might be something stormwater would want to look at.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So basically what they're saying, regardless of what you may or may not get approved for here, you might find yourself going through a second set of hoops once you get a site plan created and submitted, which could include coming back in front of the plan commission. And if there's lot coverage or drainage issues, back in front of us.
Actually, the architect is here, so if there is an approval for the building, then definitely we'll follow up with a second hearing or more for the cutout of the parking spaces to make a pass through.
It may be just as simple as submitting the site plan
Mhm.
and letting us know the area of disturbance so that we can have stormwater review it.
Oh,
I'm sure
absolutely,
there
yeah.
would be no issue.
Yeah, for drainage and flow of water and everything else, absolutely.
Me, see if I can summarize what I think I've heard, and that is that there may be some further review of this by a different entity, the stormwater for one, potentially plan commission, but perhaps not since there's not a curb cut. But that approval that we would have to get their approval before there is complete approval of this petition.
I think staff would be most comfortable in that, and so wouldn't be opposed to a conditional approval if that's the desire of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. And just to make sure that the petitioners are also understand what it is we're suggesting needs to be done before there. So even if approval tonight would be conditional upon
Oh,
their
absolutely.
review by stormwater and by staff here of the things that they were unaware of at this point.
Okay, yeah.
Also, that the site plan to staff is.
And then there was also the comment about a sunset or a review period. At the core of this is that typically a school has the parking requirements they do, because it takes into effect that some of these students may drive. But with this use and the age of the kids being these kids aren't going to drive to school.
Mhm.
But the variance that they're asking for is to provide a school. And a school is a school is a school. So our concern is somewhere down the road, the nature of the school changes. And then that would be a concern. So we might just, if the motion comes through with a sunset, the idea is that it gives the town a chance to review in case you guys change your operations. Our concern is you as an operation sell this building. It's entitled as a school. And even though your
Okay,
specific
can I get
use-
one clarity on that? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
Oh, okay. It is part school, but it's also part medical therapy. Okay, so half the building is therapy, where those 35 children will receive healthcare with OT, speech, and behavioral health as well.
And if there would be a request for a commitment, if you'd be open to it, where this would not pass on to subsequent owners. And I do understand that concern as well. If this gets sold to them, another school comes and says, well, great, we can build a school here and only have 600 parking spaces when ordinance requires more. I understand that concern. So I think it's been shown that this operation doesn't require the ordinance required amount. So it would be a commitment that you could agree to where it wouldn't pass along to subsequent owners, or it could, if approved by, the BZA down the road. But then I think that'd be a reasonable request that we could agree to.
Yes.
I do have another hypothetical, and that is that schools often have events which include parents, parents' nights and so on. And would there be a plan B if, for example, you had a parent night and all the parents were invited to come and visit the school?
Well, considering the locations, I'm doing this for 25 years, we've never had all the parents come to an event. If it's a large community event like that, we usually go to more of a public place that can house everyone. Typically, the events we kind of have are more classroom size. So parent teacher conferences are always scheduled. And so there's a flow of if there's 3 classrooms, maximum you would have would be 1 teacher or 2 giving parent-teacher conferences, and you probably have a maximum, maybe 10 families coming while waiting and exiting, because parent-teacher conferences are scheduled every 20 minutes. And that's usually held 2 to 3 times a year. If we have a function, then we do it by size of the class and we make sure the times are overlapped. So if it's a 3-hour morning session, then maybe half the class will come from 8:30 to 10. The second class of the other half of the class will come from 10 to 11:30. That's the morning work cycle. So we are very strategic in how we schedule parents because of parking issues. And we have 20 years experience of managing that already.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Once again, if there are any of the public here tonight or online who wish to speak to this petition, now would be the time. No one online, okay, and no one in the audience. All right. I guess I would see helpful now, maybe a discussion among the board and staff in terms of how best to proceed.
It sounds like it might be a conditional approval based on completing the proposed additional drive area. And that's really the only thing that
Stormwater management.
well, yeah,
Discussion.
right.
What was that?
Stormwater management
Yes, okay.
discussion.
And then the second would be just the addition of a, like I would almost propose a 5-year kind of sunset clause. Just, put it up far enough. But if something ever does change, it gives us a town a chance to come back and check.
And I guess there would also be the tying of the approval to this organization. It would not continue beyond this organization should they leave the location and it becomes something else.
Does that put us in an issue that if the organization changes, but the mission doesn't? Does that make sense? That it's just basically, sometimes it's just put the sunset on the general use as a school. So as long as it stays, with variances, you're always allowed specific performance. So the variance that they're requesting is specifically tied to this kind of use, but it still calls out as a school. And it just gives us a fairly simple way to keep it in check without encumbering them with, if their organization changes or something like that, that they've got to come back and see us.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
It sounds to me like you would be able to craft something like that, Mr. Jones.
Yes, exactly.
You could say that the approval is effective only for the petitioner and its successors. In that way, if there were a legal name change or something like that, you'd pick it up.
Okay, so sure.
And I will, just for the sake of the petitioners, the sunset that Mr. Jones mentioned, we typically with the use variance request do put a sunset so that even though we think that everything will work, sometimes it doesn't. And on the agenda this evening, there will be someone who is coming back after 5 years. We have placed a 5-year sunset on a use variance, and they will be coming back tonight. And after 5 years, if we've had neighbors up in arms, the community is yelling at us, and then it's unlikely we would renew that. But again, it's a way of making certain that we haven't made a horrible mistake here or something that we thought we understood, we didn't. So it's not unusual. It is most likely, it is the most typical thing to do with the use variance is to have a sunset clause and anticipate that all will go well and it would be renewed. So that's what is meant by the term sunset clause in the approval. Well, with that, And no further comments. Is there a motion?
So I just want clarity. What's the assignees and successors? What was that phrase again?
The petitioner and its successors.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. So I move that docket 2023. And so we will put the same term. I'm sorry. We will put the same terms in both
Variances.
variances. Okay. I move that docket 2023-17-UV use variance to provide for a school for the property located at 11712 North Michigan Road in the Urban Neighborhood Business Zoning District B1 and in the Urban Michigan Road Overlay District MRO B, conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans, a commitment to one, install a access drive to provide a circular drive pattern for the property, with the consideration that that drive pattern meets the town's development and drainage requirements.
To be reviewed for compliance to ordinance.
To be reviewed, let me strike that last few words, to be reviewed for compliance with the town's ordinances. And secondly, that this variance have a 5-year sunset clause for the petitioner and its successors for a review 5 years from date of approval for its suitability.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. You think we've nailed it there? Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Let's say we hit it a few times with the hammer. God, nailed. All right.
Was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That variance is approved. Conditionally.
And then we got to sort off the second one. Hold that over there. Okay. I move the docket. Sorry. I move the docket 2023-23 DSE development standards variance for the reduction of the required number of parking spaces from 180 to 61 for the property located at 11712 North Michigan Road in the Urban Neighborhood Business Zoning District B1 and the Urban Michigan Road Overlay District MRO B, conditionally approved as presented and described based on findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted findings of facts, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans, including the addition of a circular drive access lane that meets the town's ordinances and development standards. And then secondly, a commitment to include a 5-year sunset clause for the petitioner and its assignees.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. There's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It is approved. We'll just leave it that you will get back with staff then with the submission of those items. And I assume that since this is your petition, you'll do that as promptly as possible. Is there anything staff would like to tell them in terms of timing or otherwise?
No later than 48 hours, we'll be in contact with the petitioner and be discussing how they're going to move forward and what exhibits we would need from them in order to move their request forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Best of luck. The next item on the agenda is docket number 2023-18-DSV, J. Clark at 145 North Main Street, Zionsville, Indiana, petition for development standard variance to provide for an outdoor paver patio which exceeds the allowable coverage of 37% to 43.86%. And two, a fence that exceeds the maximum height of 6 feet to 7 feet 5 inches in the urban village residential zoning district RV. Staff, if we have your report, please.
Yes, as stated, there are two development standards variances here. The first is for lot coverage. The petitioner is proposing to construct a 600 square foot paver patio in the rear yard. These improvements, along with the existing improvements, will bring the lot coverage to 43.86%. And here you can find the submitted site plan with that. The RV zoning district allows for 35% lot coverage with a 2% bonus for pervious materials such as pavers. The request of the proposed improvements associated with pervious patios in RV is not uncommon, noting that most of the improvements are pervious and not impervious structures or covered structures, along with other properties. There are other properties in the area deviating from the current lot coverage standards, some even being greater than the petitioner's request. There you'll find the example of what the pavers will look like. Now going on to the fence, there's already an installed wood fence that is compliant with the 6 foot high at grade when it's on the petitioner's property. However, as it presents to the neighbor's property to the south, the height varies anywhere from 7 feet to 7 feet 5 inches. The petitioner has indicated that there's a block base installed in these areas to help drainage runoff. With these grade changes on the property, it could be understood to why the height of the fence is greater in the south yard. I'll just run through a few of the pictures here that were provided from the petitioner. Lastly, the topic of drainage has been mentioned in the petitioner's narrative and the finding of fact for both requests. However, at the time the staff report was issued, there was no formal plan submitted to the BZA. The petitioner has since provided documents to staff that you members also have, and I believe possibly this has been relayed to some of the adjacent owners. Staff would request that the petitioner go into further detail of the drainage plans for the site, ensuring that no runoff would adversely affect any surrounding properties. With that said and being addressed, staff is favorable of both requests. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I do have a question. The fact that the fence was 1 foot to 1.5 feet taller than ordinance stipulates, was that something that was discovered by the homeowner, or was that discovered by a neighbor, or how was that brought to the attention of the?
I believe that was brought to our department's attention by, I'm not sure. I think it was by a neighbor.
Somebody else.
Or somebody who was on site possibly brought that to our attention.
I have a question similar, but a little different, and that is that it indicates that it is 6 foot on from grade on the petitioner's lot, but adjacent to that, it's not. Now
Correct.
the area appears to be fairly flat. I walked there today, and so was the grade raised when that home was built, or?
I mean, that would be my best assumption as to why the grade is higher on petitioner's property, is because the grade was raised in that area. That's my best
So that would make
explanation.
one's very suspicious about drainage, if in fact there's a difference of that much in grade. And I'm seeing pictures with the blocks underneath, which according to the narrative were put there to help with drainage. So I'm curious to understand whether if French drains were installed, why they needed the additional blocks, pavers or concrete blocks or whatever those are placed under the fence would be interesting for me to understand. So
Well, I guess those are questions we
I
have
think so.
for the petitioner.
that's exactly right.
Yeah, and at a certain point in time, I need just to, I guess, get a little clarity out of staff. So I went and pulled up or obtained the original kind of site plan for the house. And based on the information I pulled out of it, the current situation with the house footprint to me was 2,189 square feet. Per what was submitted, there's an existing 550 square feet of front porch and walk and side decks and stuff. Obviously, we don't include the driveway in these calculations. So I came up with 2,739 square feet of structure, walk and porch. One of the first items I've got is in some of the documents, they keep talking about a 0.17 acre lot, but the lot's really only 6,788 feet, which is only about 0.15 of an acre. So I'm just kind of concerned as I'm trying to figure out their math, because based on what I put together from the get-go, they were sitting at 40% lot coverage. And when you start adding this new patio, they're at 49%. So none of the math really seems to add up in anything that I've been reading through. So I'm trying to figure out
Were you counting the walkway into the lot coverage
the sidewalk out front. Correct.
that you deduct that? We don't count walkways or driveways towards lot coverage.
Okay. So when I came up with the 550 feet, that's based on the information they've provided on this, the Wesley's drawing. So we don't count the front. We don't count the 240 square feet of front walk. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But you do count the front porch.
Correct.
It's assumed that the lot size itself, that is the dimensions of the lot, are from the county records. Is that correct?
Yes, we pull those from the county, the property record card.
So that one, though it may not be indisputable, I assume that's the common source of that information, so we rely upon that. You know, it is dangerous to do math in public, Larry.
Not really.
No.
He's using a calculator, he's cheating, so don't worry.
And not if you do it all day long. So when you're figuring out lease square footage for tenants. Now, you never want me to count your money because I always count it in my favor. But
Glad we had that stated in a public forum.
well, it's all right. Everybody knows it. So the other questions I'm going to have, one will at some point pertain to this whole French drain, the drainage. I did go out and walk the site. I find it kind of interesting that there's these outlets tied right up next to our sidewalks. I also found it interesting that it appears the alley's been raised. So I didn't know residents were allowed to make changes to the public thoroughfares of the town of Zionsville. So at some point, I'm going to ask how that happens.
Can you say that one more time, please?
I'm saying when you walk around this home, the drainage that they've put in that it appears to take the downspout drains seem to open site at the next to the sidewalks, which basically means what these things are doing is pumping water out onto the sidewalks and into the street. Secondly, when you walk the alley, it becomes kind of evident that behind this site, the alley has been restoned and raised higher than the adjoining properties. And so at some point, I'm going to ask her, I'm going to want some clarity as to when it comes to drainage on properties, are residents allowed to basically pump the water out onto the city sidewalks? And two, this situation where it appears that a public thoroughfare has been altered.
And the public thoroughfare was the alley.
The alley.
So, Mr. Jones, if I can help perhaps a little bit regarding daylighting onto the sidewalk, I'm not sure one way or another that is something that the stormwater department would approve of. Most certainly, our understanding of the ordinance is that your water must be contained on your lot. It's your responsibility to manage that. Regarding the alley, that is not information, if it's been raised, that has been conveyed to Suzanne or I. So if there have been changes to that alley, I think petitioner probably needs to let us know where that is at.
I just found it interesting as I was walking, I noticed it.
Again, the petitioner will have the opportunity to answer those questions.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff at this point? Nope. All right. Is the petitioner's representative here?
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, Mike Andrioli, 1393 West Oak Street. With me tonight is Jane Clark, who owns the property at 145 North Main Street and is seeking two variances, as staff has indicated. One for a lot coverage up to the requested amount as contained in the narrative, as well as in the staff report, for a patio. The house meets the appropriate lot coverage itself, in and of itself. And what puts it over, quite frankly, is the patio itself that adds additional square footage. That patio would be enclosed in the fencing that's put around the back area of the property at 145 North Main Street. The fencing is along the south side, along the rear side where the alley is, and then it connects from the alley back to the house, so that the porch itself and the interior will be, for the most part, out of view as it relates to the use of that particular patio. And notwithstanding all of that, there is a lot coverage issue as it relates to that. And that's why we're here with regard to that particular variance itself. As far as the fence is concerned, the staff report indicated correctly there was a when it was put in, it was at grade to the inside of the fence looking out in the interior of the property, but it was over 6 foot as it presents to the property to the south. We provided pictures both to the common property lines to the south where that fence is located, as well as to the north. Some of the concerns that have been raised had to do with drainage, and we've submitted a letter from Wes Addington, who did the drainage as well as the landscaping, and including the fence, that indicates that essentially a French drain perforator pipe wrapped in gravel has been put along each side of the property lines for my client on the south side, on the inside of the fence, and on the north side outside of the house, close to the property line, to prevent water from actually migrating to each of their neighbors. We thought and quite frankly, one of the advantages of building a new house, as opposed to most of the other houses on Main Street, which simply sheet water off their properties wherever it would go, is that this is basically being channeled out to the street that have storm drains and those types of things. So we thought it was a good way to make sure that we did not have any drainage on the property to the north, nor any drainage on the property to the south. That fence has been installed for a period of time. It's been pretty dry the last couple of weeks, but we've had some torrential downpours prior to that. There's been no complaints of drainage or concerns raised with any of that with regard to the construction to date, either north property or south property. So those things seem to be working well. And again, that is one advantage of installing new construction, because you can do it correctly when it's done, when the installation is done. So we would specifically request that the board consider that. If our numbers aren't correct or there's concern about our numbers, we'll be happy to go back and take a look at them. But we vetted those numbers, I think, pretty closely with staff and independently. So hopefully, at least in terms of our presentation, we've got the numbers that we're requesting correctly in terms of the percentage of lot coverage. It's interesting to note that the property to the north came in for a lot coverage increase just last year in 2022. Right adjacent to us. And Jane, who was a property owner at the time, signed a letter of approval. That was in the letters and the correspondence that we've sent to you with regard to Mr. Dam, the dam's concerns with regard to drainage. And I shared with Suzanne that once we got the letter from Mr. Addington, we submitted that to Mr. and Mrs. Dam, so they had an opportunity to see what had gone in there and what was placed in there to assure themselves that there's not going to be any drainage issues and concerns. One of the concerns raised by Mr. Dam was what that was going to do to his foundation. But if you look at the pictures that were provided on the north side, you'll see that there's green space between the Clark residence and the lot line, and then additional green space between the lot line to the north to the driveway that the dams have, and then the house is on the other side of that. As to the grade itself, I believe that the grade, or at least the use of the grade, was probably close to what is purporting or presenting to the adjoining property owner at this time. There was a garage, there was a structure there, right close to the property line, that was removed when this house was built. So when the old house was removed and the driveway at that point and essentially an older garage, that was built up. As far as the dirt and the grade itself, I can't really speak to that. I don't have any independent knowledge of that. I suspect some of that occurred when the construction occurred. How much of it in relation to what was there before with regard to the garage as it presented to the property to the south, I don't have any of the older pictures, but I know I was there and viewed that older house at the time, and I noticed that it certainly was built up because it was a garage and it had some type of block underneath it in order to go ahead and access it. So again, that was all torn down. We didn't keep pictures of it at that point, so I can't really say for certain because I simply don't know. Thank you.
Any questions for the petitioner's representative?
I do have a question.
Pardon me?
I have a question.
Yes, can I hear it here and then go back?
You sure can. I'll speak clearly and loudly. I do still have a question regarding the French drains, as I mentioned earlier, that were installed on either side of the property. And if in fact there are French drains along this fence line, which I'm looking here, that has the blocks, my understanding in reading the narrative was that the blocks were installed there to prohibit water from going under the fence into the neighboring property. At least that's what the narrative states. Is that incorrect?
Well, it's not entirely correct. And I think that raises a good point. I think
If you'll start that discussion over, Mr. Andreoli, when you're at the mic. Yeah,
I'm
thank
pretty
you.
loud, but not that loud. If you look at the Wes Addington's report, it looked like part of the block was put in there in order to go ahead and make sure that the fence was up so that mulch or anything else wouldn't migrate on over to the property to the south. So they didn't get anything over to the property to the south. The actual drain that was put in just on the inside of the fence that was installed on the south side, on the inside, on my client's property, from the alley on up to the walk in the front. So that's where the actual drain went in. Hopefully that answered your question.
It doesn't, because my question would be then, is this block underneath all of the sections of the fence or only on this side of the property?
Sorry.
Is this block that's been placed here that raises the fence between a foot and a foot and a half above what's permitted only on
Certainly on the side of the adjoining property or the side.
Okay, so you're telling us that it was placed there to keep mulch from washing under the fence to the neighboring property.
So that's
Is-
what he said.
So would it not have solved the problem to have the fence be flush with the ground? I'm assuming that's the way it is in the other areas that don't have block under it. I don't understand why I don't understand the strategy here, particularly since it puts the fence at a height which is above the ordinances, what the ordinance permits.
And quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a fair question. All I know is that the block was placed to help retain the soil, the mulch, and any water that would migrate to the south, as well as the under drain that goes from the alley to the street that would help pick up all of that water. So none of that water would migrate. It was a combination of the two. At this point, the options are, the fence is already there. The options are that, I suspect they could probably cut the fence down to 6 feet presenting to the south and leave it up for the rest of the area, since it's at grade at that area. That's one of the options. The other option is to grant the variance. And again, normally when we have these fence size issues and other issues with regard to that, you're looking at properties that might have an impact on light coming into their properties and those types of things. And we presented pictures to show you that as it relates to that particular property, that there aren't any windows on that side of the house at all. So that's not one of the normal issues.
Actually, one of the remonstrants mentions that that's actually not the case, that there are windows on that side. So, and I think there's an aesthetic question there. The difference between a 6 foot fence and a 7.5 foot fence. Aesthetically, it's more than just whether it's going to block somebody's windows. I mean, from my point of view, the ordinance exists. Well, the ordinance exists for a reason. And I think that obviously there was this does not comply with the ordinance. So now the question is what happens about that. So
if I can speak to what they told me.
If you would, yeah.
Sure. I'm Jane Clark. It's my house.
Your address. Which address?
145 North Main Street.
Very good. No, okay.
If I can speak to your questions about the wall, the cinder blocks that were under it. What I was told is that it was partially a grade problem, that Zionsville said that when they started to build the house, that the grade of the house should be flush with the alley and the house to the east of me, behind me. So, and if you look at that house, it's flat with that house. So then you got a grade problem on one side because, the house to the south of me is so much lower. So what Mike said was true, as far as the landscaper, he came in and they're working with the fence guy and they said, if we don't put blocks here, we're going to get all this runoff from all your mulch because I'm at a different grade, out my driveway and out the south side of my house. So that's what I was told. And that's, I think it's both. I think was both runoff and the grade difference between the south and the east side of the house.
If you look at the pictures, and it holds true even on the north side, if you look at the pictures that I provided, the grade at the alley, the pavers, the driveway, and the lot line going to the north as well as to the south, from the alley, the grade, it's at grade. But if you extend it north, then we, and with the property to the south being so much lower at that point, there's clearly a grade issue. at
And
that
as far,
particular point.
as far as the windows are concerned, there are windows on the north side of the adjacent house, but they're beyond the fence.
Yeah, on the fence.
So in the front. So yes, there are windows. Now, I mean, I guess if it's not granted, I take it down a foot. I personally think that looks a lot worse. And take the blocks out. See what happens. I think they're preventative. I don't think Wes was lying when he said it. I think he's the president of the Indiana Landscaping Association and he knew what he was doing. But I mean, if there's an issue with it, that's the alternative, right?
Well, I think if you're asking me whether that's the I mean, I would say that you put in French drain specifically to handle that problem.
I think they put in both to handle that problem, especially on that side of the house because of the difference in grade that we were doing what the Zionsville told us to do when we built the house. And if the alley is, and I noticed that too, you know, when they replaced the rocks so that they were nicer from all the construction, and it does look about this much higher now, like they didn't break them flush. So I don't even like it. That it seems like I'm going over a hump, but I think they just didn't even them out, maybe put too many rocks down.
There's probably a practical matter of using masonry there rather than wood.
It's the practical matter that the last man in always builds on top of the hill.
Well,
And if you don't have a top of a hill to build on, you build your own hill. I have had to chase adjoining property owners off many of my properties that they come in and remodel after I've acquired something. And everybody wants to be up. Because drainage along with other things flow downhill.
So it's at least easy to understand why your
I agree
neighbors
with
are
that. And the
concerned.
house behind me is newer, so, but
Right.
we are flush with it, and that's what the builders told me, was that it was, which honestly, I mean,
So the core issues, regardless of all this, is that one, we've got a lot coverage issue. Two, while yes, I went out and inspected and checked and saw the drain tiles and see how things are all put in. The term French drain is being bandied around. A French drain is something that you put into typically a low area and then carry the tile out to a lower spot and open side it. Farmers put in drain tiles, which is French drain is a fancy way of saying the same thing the farmers do. When you put in a septic field, you fundamentally put a French drain around it often to keep it well drained so that it evaporates. The issue here is what has been put in and being called a French drain is not a drain, but something that is conveying the water off the house out to the sidewalk. And they are that's item number one. The water is not being contained on the property. We went out there in a heavy rain, you'd see it bubbling out there by the sidewalk. If we go out there in the winter, you're going to find it bubbling up around their downspouts because at some point these will freeze. They're not below frost and they do not open sight, so they do not stay dry. Third is on the original plan, they had talked about putting a dry well in the backyard, just take care of the sump pump. And it appears that where this patio is going to go is sitting over the top of that even exists. So, we've been down this road repeatedly. We have had individuals come in and provide us with engineered on-site retention systems, which usually consist of a dry well or some type of cistern that this water actually goes to. I'm not seeing any of that here. And so I'm not particularly happy that we're hearing a bunch of verbiage about the fence and the walls and the block. The bottom line is it was easy to raise the grade of this lot in relation to the existing adjoining property owners. And within the rules and regs and our building inspectors, we are somewhat limited in our ability to enforce it. And clearly on the first set of drawings that I've got, there's grades that are set at all four corners of the property. If we went out there now, they would all be 1.5 feet higher than this. So it's kind of.
And in your experience, Larry, we have seen these very elaborately engineered systems.
Correct.
That prevent that, usually being done at a very different time in the order of, either a home being built or landscaping being done.
Well, they're being done in place as part of the package to obtain the variance
Right.
for what they intend to put in. I think the last one we did was the individual who wanted a swimming pool.
Mhm.
And they put on their property and it was designed. Now, do we have any way of enforcing it actually worked and went in, but blah, blah, blah. But we at least have that series of commitments. A couple of years ago, we approved the subdivision of a lot with very detailed instructions on how the one lot was going to take care of some of the adjoining property owners' drainage issues. The individual came back because he didn't read the commitments to the parcel. So.
And I guess one difference here is that this was a landscaper who had a solution or a recommendation versus I know we've had an engineering firm who kind of specializes in that design system. We have, I guess, a greater degree of confidence in those than something that the landscaper designed.
Well, Mr. Andreoli, can you tell me, is the manufactured flow well, storm drainage, dry well that is shown on the plan installed? Does that exist?
You're asking what that is?
I'm asking if it exists. Has it been installed per the plan that they submitted when they got the building permit?
You're talking about the sump line or manufactured flow well storm drainage?
Dry
Dry
well.
well?
Mhm.
That may be pre-existing, I don't know. I have no idea.
Likely not.
I can find out. I'm just telling you.
Well,
You're asking me.
get that back. That's the most,
You're asking me a question. And
all right,
I don't know.
find me the answer, please.
I can't find you the answer. The landscaper and the builder are not here. My suggestion is, if there are concerns about drainage, there are concerns as to how that drainage should be done. I'm happy to go ahead and revisit that issue with the landscape, with the builder and an engineer if we need to take a look at that, to answer Mr. Jones's questions and his concerns. If that's not going to make any difference one way or the other, then I certainly understand that, appreciate that. But if that is a significant issue that you think needs to be addressed, we're happy to do it. All I can say is what was installed to try to make sure that our drainage did not cause any problems to the adjacent neighbors, which is what I thought we're supposed to be doing. Most of the houses in and along Main Street just sheet water wherever it goes, and wherever it goes, generally into the street or into the alley, is picked up as part of the stormwater system that we have. But if there's concerns about that, and that's a legitimate question that Mr. Jones asked about that, I don't know the answer to that. If that's installed or why it was installed, or even if it's.
And part and parcel, the reason we have lot coverage ratios is so that there is sufficient open lot to accept the sheet drainage that occurs. I said, the reason we have the lot coverage ratios is to make sure that there is open land to accept the sheet drainage off of your property, your neighbor's property, the sidewalks out in front, the alley and back. It's a very inexact science. And obviously the zoning and codes that have been in place, the residents and the layout of the town of Zionsville predate it all. Hence, we are more prone to try to give variances to existing properties. But when a new home comes along, a new home is provided the opportunity to conform with the rules and regulations provided.
Well, tell me what those are, because I'm
It's
not.
a 35% lot coverage.
I'm not aware that there's any rules or regulations that suggest that you can't pick water up from the lot lines with these type of perforated drains wrapped in fabric.
All right,
And,
so if you're picking it up, where are you displacing it to?
Pardon me?
If you are picking the water up with the French drain system, where are you displacing it to? Is there a cistern on the property? Is there dry wells we don't know of?
Well, I admitted I don't know that.
And
And
what would you like to do?
What I'm suggesting to you is I'm happy to find out the answer to those particular issues, if those are issues. Those are legitimate questions. I don't have the answer to that tonight. The builder's not here. He's out of town, so is the landscaper. So there's nothing that I can do to be able to provide you with a legitimate answer and a truthful and honest answer to that, because I simply don't know. That's the best answer I can give you tonight.
Perhaps, Mr. President, it makes sense to continue this.
Well, I
Have unanswered
think it would be of value, since everything that we have known up to this point has been concerned by neighbors with respect to drainage. While there have been comments about the height of the wall, it seems drainage is truly the issue that they're concerned about. We know from those who in advance demonstrated a interest in remonstrating. We don't know if there are others here. I think it would be beneficial for us to ask if there are other remonstrators that would wish to say whether they're supporting or opposed to the project, and get all the information, and then we come back to deciding what we need to do. So if there are no further questions for the petitioner's representative, are there anyone here this evening or online that wish to speak for or against the project? No one online. You would state your name and address, please.
Robin Dam, 155 North Main Street, Zionsville. It's my husband, David. Spot on. A lot of your questions are exactly our questions. And I would just like to state that Jane has been awesome doing everything she possibly can. Just not sure she's had all the information that she's needed to take care of these things. Just a couple of things. It's been mentioned a couple of times about that our homes on Main Street just have water that go everywhere when it rains. In fact, our house does have our drains go down into a pipe that feeds out into the street, into the water system. So we don't have runoff that just goes everywhere. As well as I think some of the other neighbors can speak to the same, that they have that as well. So that's one of the things that I wanted to mention. Definitely drainage is a concern on our side. We're on the north side. There is green space in between our houses. Yes, there's a strip of grass there. But we also have a house that was built in the late 1800s versus a house that has very new technology and is able to, their build is able to accommodate drainage, or at least protection from water, a lot more so than our property is. My husband's much better at speaking to this, so I'm just going to turn it over to him.
Thank you. So again, I'd like to mention Jane has been a great neighbor, has done a great job of trying to help make sure everybody's happy with what she's doing there. We get a little nervous, as my wife said, our house was built in 1880, so we don't have basement and foundation to build for a wet crawl space or basement. So if we get wet, it's going to be a problem for us. They have put in, I think, to your point, French drains being used kind of liberally here, but there is a drain. They've done a good job putting a drain pipe in, but that drain pipe's kind of on our property line. So maybe it's God's blessing that we're in a drought here the last 4 months, but we haven't had any water issues yet. My question is, what happens if we do have a wet season? And Jane has talked to me about that. I don't want to put you on the spot, Jane, so maybe hearsay, but I believe her that she's willing to help us if that's a problem. What kind of surprised me today was when we worked with, when the town rebuilt Main Street, we worked with Lance and the teams, and we put discharge outlets on the curb to get the water out of the residences into the sewer system. I was kind of surprised when Jane wasn't allowed to do that on her property. So I don't know if that changed or what, but my suggestion tonight was going to be, hey, if we do run into a problem with water eventually, maybe we take out that perforated pipe, French drain, and put in a solid drain pipe and allow us to get that out on the street so that we can get the water out of the residence areas. I'm not speaking for Jane there. I think she would be willing to do that with us too, but that would help make sure that we're not flooding our property going forward if we run into to water issues. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. Are you updating me here?
Yeah, we've been talking about the elevation of the grade too, and I just would like to state that
So yeah,
when that was an empty lot.
that's kind of a surprise too. And hearing that back from Jane too is she's been put in a position to build the house level with the alley in the back. And Larry, to your point, the alley in the back is a little bit higher. It's 11 inches higher than it was a year ago, two years ago. How it got that way, I don't know. But you're right, things roll downhill. That's why I'm a little nervous. So if we get a lot of water, I'm about some of them. So
But with the garage variance, we haven't started that process even yet, and that actually, our deviation approved us for 39.6% with the garage. And the lot was already at 38% grandfathered in for how it was built originally. So very, very minimal increase when if we ever do get to do the garage. Just one last comment on the whole alley thing. I've even recently thought about this, asked what would need to be done to have that alley surveyed, because as the house behind us that was referenced on Maple that backs up to the alley was built, very large home also. As people have done things that back up to that alley keeps morphing. It keeps getting wider and it keeps getting taller in places as people for construction add their own gravel, or people that want to have a little bit more turnaround space because of the cars on the alley, they add more gravel. So that may have contributed to the issue as well, that Not only the construction you were talking about where they tried to make up for what they've done, but others may have done the same thing, so. But that doesn't provide a reason for people, us having the situation we are now either, so anyways.
So, yeah, I don't know enough yet about the mechanics now. If you guys do a continuation or to vote on this, but my request would be if you do vote and approve that we add that capability that we would be able to remove this perforated fridge drain and remove the water from both residences so that we're not continually flooding.
Or risky.
I don't think that that's something that this board could assure you of. We don't control that. I do have a question about routing that downspout water into the street itself. Was that 33 years ago that you did that, or was that?
That was when they rebuilt Main Street.
Okay, so that's been some time ago.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
They had us
I don't know
all do that.
if staff can comment on if that is no longer permissible. That would be getting water to the storm sewers.
Well, I don't want to get too many people in trouble here because that's why I was surprised when Jane was telling me they wouldn't let her put the exits on there, because about 2 years ago, I asked if I'd be allowed to put another curb in or another drain in. And the town's only request was, can you have a professional do it just so we know that you don't chew up our curb? So I don't know if it's changed in the last 2 years or not, but I think that's kind of the issue here is we're morphing a little bit and
It's a whole
causes
engineering
problems.
analysis.
Well, it would seem reasonable. I mean, the storm sewers do carry away water that results from storms. That's its intent. And it's generally at street level. There are placed elsewhere, but that is pretty crucial, getting rid of that water.
It gives you away. I mean, the house is already built.
There's nothing they can do about that.
So I think it gives a solution to get water out and protect at least the 3 properties nearby. If it were to become a problem down the road.
Well, I'll kind of turn to Mr. Jones. He's fairly experienced at this, but I think that those assurances really need to come from someone who knows what they're doing. I've had a lot of things I thought were going to work and they didn't. So it probably requires the skills of an expert at that to really know. And that's something I don't think this board can assure you of. But we could, we do control, I guess, whether or not this is approved. That's about the extent. And it can be continued with that stipulation, but I think that's something that this group needs to decide upon. But again, the assurances you're asking about, we can't provide.
I think it just becomes a lot less, it's at least a lot less resistance than having to engineer a dry well and evacuation system on the property. Because where are you gonna take it once you get it out of that yard? The next 2 yards down by, or so it's a quick and easy solution.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if Mr. Rotman's presence there is going to be. Are you going to serve as a remonstrator or? No. No. Oh, well, okay. I said for or against, so it can be. If you would provide your name and address, please.
Todd Rotman, address 320 West Hawthorne Street. Oddly enough, a couple of years back, I had to get a variance for a fence that was installed and was over 7 feet tall. Ours was due to ground slope, so it stepped. It was different than this issue, but what we had to do was hire a professional engineer to do a drainage report, and they needed to do a drainage report of how the house previously was. So the original house, and compare it to the new conditions and verify that there is the same or less water leaving the site on every side. So that would be my suggestion to give people peace of mind, is to actually have engineer do a full report so that everybody knows what to expect.
Thank you. I think
Like I
the
said-
issue here is not necessarily the height of the fence. It's where does the water go and making certain that neighbors are not affected by more water than they should be.
Regardless of all the commentary we made, if you walk the site, it's fairly obvious that it has been raised from its previous grades to be higher than the adjoining properties. And it's not, my issues aren't particular to this property. I've sat down here and banged the same hammer over and over again. Drainage is a cumulative issue. And at some point, somewhere, it comes to bear. And at some point, it either comes to bear that we overwhelm our stormwater systems. It comes to bear that people start tying it into our sanitary sewers, and then we start overwhelming our treatment facilities. Or it just shows up at some point somewhere in the village as a swamp. And, you know, then you start having street and road problems, you get heave and thaw, blah, 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 blah. So the 35% lot coverage is a imperfect number, and it was applied across the board to a town that probably the majority of the properties do not conform to. And so we are left with this monthly battle over drainage of trying to conform to a number that has been assigned and trying to do it in such a way that everyone is treated equitably. My concern is when I see stuff like this, I see that during the course of constructing this home, they had the opportunity to address these issues in an engineered manner that could have given everyone a certain level of comfort that the playing field is being kept level. And my concern is playing field has been raised 1.5 feet. And if we're going to allow this individual in this location to raise it 1.5 feet, then when somebody wants to, since once again, we have no protection of the adjoining properties, as long as Ms. Clark is happier with if when somebody builds next door, they build 1.5 feet higher than you, then, you know, game on.
Well, to the issue here, the home's built, it's higher now for one reason or another. Is there and you know, as staff has pointed out, we have a number of homes that do exceed 35 foot. Our concern when that happens is always drainage. And there are some which are obviously ones that require pretty extensive work. And there are others that don't. This one is, I don't think we know which one this one is because we don't have a problem that has been demonstrated yet. But we have adjoining neighbors and neighbors nearby who are concerned, and their concern is legitimate. So is there a way of testing to find out as best we can whether or not expansion of the 35% will unduly affect any of the neighbors or not?
Well, and yes, there is. And that is, there are licensed engineers that have the ability to take the size of the lot, the grade, the configuration of the soils, and determine, will the site absorb everything as designed? Is additional work needed? And what would that be? And what would be the capacity of it? It is engineering and it can be done.
I would submit that even the folks that installed the drains, French or not, and the fence are skeptical of the efficiency of that system because they put those concrete blocks under the fence in order to keep water from getting under the fence to the adjoining property. I mean, you can say it's to keep mulch from getting over there, but how does mulch get over there except borne by water? So I think it's like a stopgap measure that to me, looking at it as a non-engineer, is an indication of a lack of confidence that the drains that have been installed are going to manage the water that is there. And maybe I'm completely wrong, maybe it's an aesthetic, but the description was essentially that this is to keep things from floating under the fence into the neighbor's property. So.
No, I think you're probably right. At the same time, I would say that probably a landscaper is not the person who probably has checked the soil composition, measured the flow and so forth. So it was their best opinion, and they probably in many cases are absolutely right, but not in every case.
Right.
I guess maybe to summarize that it appears to me, based on my experience, and the only reason you keep me up here, that some of the installed and potentially uninstalled features of this property could potentially cause moisture issues for the adjoining property owners. I can make a motion that we continue this with the request that the homeowner come back with, like I said, we've got Badger Engineering that we've all they seem to understand the issue. Mr. Rotman's worked with them, correct? Haven't you? CEC, other engineering companies, and give us some degree of comfort that what is installed will not negatively affect the adjoining property owners. And then we can quit relying on whether the alley is here or there or what the blocks do and how the mulch flows, but we've got something concrete. And we keep consistent with what we have made of other residents in terms of requesting this type of information, because eventually it will show up someplace if we keep ignoring it. And that is the drainage issue and the lot coverage numbers.
Agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
And at least the petitioner's representative has indicated that, but is that something, because I think at this point, it's a matter of, do we continue this or do we bring it to close this evening? And I think the continuance allows you that opportunity to find out from a professional whether or not the plan here is one which will make certain that your neighbors are not affected when there is excess water.
As soon as Larry suggested, I thought that was the way to go. Yes.
Thank you. Well, Larry, can you put that into the form of a motion then?
I move the docket 2023-18 DSV development standard variance to provide for an increase in the lot coverage to 43.86% for a patio paver property located at 145 North Main Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District RVB, continued to the July 5th, 2023 BZA meeting, with the applicant providing a engineered report of the drainage conditions of the existing and proposed site developments.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. And for variance number 2.
What?
Variance number 2.
I move that docket 2023-18 DFE development standard variance to provide for a deviation of the fence height to be a maximum of 7 foot 5 inches for the property located at 145 North Main Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District RVB, continued to the July 5th, 2023 BZA meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Postawait. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The docket number 2023-18 DSV then will be continued to the July 5th meeting. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, docket number 2023-20 DSV M Griffin, 280 Governor's Lane, Zionsville, Indiana. Petition for development standard variance to provide for a pergola, which deviates from the side yard setback from the required 7 feet to 2 feet in the urban single residential zoning district RSF 3. Is the petitioner here?
Oh, Steve, I think I'm going to go first, remember?
Oh, I'm sorry, petitioner. Sit, you can rest for just a moment. We're going to get the staff report. Yeah, old habit.
No worries. As stated, the petitioner is requesting to install a pergola 2 feet from the property line to the south property line when 7 feet is required in RSF 3. Go here to the next slide. As you can see outlined on this existing plot plan, The pergola will go on the south property line. Given the scale and placement of the existing improvements and that the proposed pergola is over gravel, it will be pervious, not covered, and is in staff's opinion, not out of character with the immediate area and is favorable of the request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Nope. Hearing none. Could we hear from the petitioner's representatives? You'd give us your name and address, please, and information that we might find helpful.
My name is Kyle DeCourcy, address 11950 Sandy Drive in Zionsville. I am here on behalf of John and Molly Griffin. I'm a contractor, landscape construction owner operator with my business partner, and the Griffins have asked us to construct a pergola over a gravel sitting area on the south side of their property. And we are requesting a variance to build the pergola within the 7-foot setback.
Is the area gravelled now?
Yes, there's an
It is.
existing gravel sitting area with a fire pit.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner's representative? Seeing none, do we have anyone here who wishes to speak for or against this? Or do we have anyone online who wishes to speak for or against the petition? Does not appear so. Any comments or questions from the board members? And if not, is there a motion?
I did just have a question for
Okay.
the petitioner's representative. There's an existing fence there, is that right?
That's correct. There's a
And that's-
6-foot wooden privacy fence.
And the pergola itself would be 10 feet.
At its tallest point, it
Yes.
would be 10-foot tall. That's correct.
And the roof of the pergola is just cross hatched. It's not solid.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Is the 10-foot nearer to the home? Or is it nearer to the fence? Or is it level?
It's going to open up slightly. So the tallest point will be on the north end against the house. And it will slope about 5% back towards the
Okay.
fence.
Is there a motion for the petition?
I'll go. I
Thank
move
you.
the docket number 2023-20-DSD Development Standards Variance to provide for deviations from the side yard setbacks to 2 feet for the construction of a pergola for the property located at 280 Governor's Lane in the urban single-family residential zoning district RSF3. The approved is presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact in substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Postaway. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It is approved. Best of luck with your project.
Sir.
Next item on the agenda is docket number 2023-21-DSV D. Cyril at 295 North Main Street, Zionsville. Petition for the development standard variance to provide for an addition which 1 exceeds the allowable lot coverage from 37% to 41%. 2 deviates from the rear yard setback to 20 feet to 5 foot 2 inches in the urban village residential zoning district RV. Sir, Mr. Rotman, are you there? Okay.
Nope.
We have staff report. Yeah, just wanted to make sure we had someone here that was going to speak to it. Go ahead, staff.
As stated, the petitioner is proposing to do a 2-story addition on the east side of the property to accommodate for a mudroom, attached garage, and an owner's suite on the 2nd story. Also, I don't think it was clearly pointed out in the staff report, but they're also constructing a new porch and patio on the north side of the property. Both these improvements requires the need for a development standards variance for lot coverage and deviating from the rear setback. With the current improvements on the property, the lot coverage is non-compliant at 41.6%. It should be noted as well with this project that the petitioner will be, if approved, this project, they will be removing 2 existing walkways, flagstone patio, and a deck where the addition will go. With the proposed improvements, the lot coverage will be 41%. And the petitioner is requesting to exceed the maximum lot coverage by 5.1% and utilizing almost 1% of the pervious allowance. Along with the scale and placement of the contemplated improvements, while being conscientious of existing lot coverage and decreasing, staff is favorable of that request. Then the rear setback, the primary building setbacks are meant or to meet the 20-foot rear setback for the RV zoning district, and the petitioner is proposing to be 5 foot 2 inches to accommodate the addition. There are a range of rear setbacks within the alley block, which are less than 20 feet. Some are primary structures and some are accessory structures. The petitioner is attempting to provide for a garage in which, from what I can tell, the subject site has previously not had. And with the existing configuration of the residence, it does create some challenges to meet the setbacks, and is also not out of character with the immediate area, and staff is favorable of this request. Let me go through, I think, the elevations here too. I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? This is a marginal reduction in the lot coverage with the removal of those.
Yeah, I think it's almost decreasing the lot coverage than what exists there currently.
Yeah.
Slightly.
If there are no questions for staff, Mr. Rotman, you are the petitioner's representative.
Hello, Todd Rotman, address 320 West Hawthorne Street. Joining us tonight online are George and Lori Searle, but I'll be making the presentation. They're just available if there's any questions for them. Appreciate your time this evening. There is about a 1% reduction in lot coverage due to this. I can guarantee you those walks and patios are going to go away because me and 4 people from my office have already removed all of them, and we are reutilizing them at our homes. So we didn't want to see, good materials go to waste. Those have actually already been removed. The main goal for this project was to add a garage, since a garage is not currently present. There is no way to put a garage onto the house and maintain that 20-foot setback without doing some demolition on the existing structure. So we are putting the garage on the back side of the house. It necessitates a little over 5 feet distance to the property line on that edge. The alley is another about 3.5 feet away from that. So we're about 8.5 feet away from the edge of the alley itself. In your documents, I've got 2 exhibits. One is everybody on that block and their lot coverage, and the second is everybody on that block and the distance from their garage or accessory structure to the alley. So by comparison, we are fitting within kind of the character and the established setbacks, lot coverages, et cetera, in that area. So I do not feel like we would be affecting the character along the alleyway, and especially not along Main Street, because our addition is to the rear of the home. The only additions that would clearly be visible would be the addition to the front porch and then the side porch on the north side of the house. But we think those both will be very pleasant additions, creating more outdoor space, more interaction between neighbors, and tying in with the house. The key has always been to preserve the house and kind of renovate the interior of it so that it can last another 100 years. And we appreciate your taking a look at this and available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rotman. Questions for the petitioner's representative?
Not really questions, just comments, and I'm very appreciative of the urge to use the existing house and not sort of go back down to ground level and start over again. I'm very appreciative of that. And updating it to 21st century usage. I think that's laudable. And also I want to compliment them on the work they've done in communicating with their neighbors with regard to their plans. I think that makes things easier for us. And I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you.
Yeah, to George and Lori's credit, they've been very good about reaching out to neighbors, being neighborly, and they definitely, love the house and wanted to preserve the house. So credit goes to them.
We should comment them or commend them then on recycling their flagstone as well. Nice to put it to good use.
Yeah, there's nothing that we're involved with that goes into demolition that we don't kind of salvage stuff out of. Hate to see it go to waste.
And although it shows it on the drawing, so the slope of the new roof additions will match the slope of the existing roofs on the building. And although it's not given, it doesn't appear that it's going to have any kind of height issues.
Right, it's below the maximum building height.
And we do end up with a net reduction of lot coverage. Okay. That makes me happy.
All right, thank you. Are there any remonstrators who are here to speak for or against the project or online? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Yeah, trying to find one. You find it?
Variance number 1, I move the docket number 2023-21-DSD Development Standards variance to provide for an increase in lot coverage to 41% for the provided additions for the property located at 295 North Main Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RV, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much.
Variance number 2. I move that docket number 2023-21-DSB Development Standards variance to provide for a deviation of the rear side yard setback to 5 feet 2 inches for the construction of an addition for the property located at 295 North Main Street in the Urban Residential Village Zoning District, RV, be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And so petition passes. Best of luck, Mr. Rotman.
All right, can I go now? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next and final item on the agenda
Didn't give me the whole
is
site plan.
docket number 2023-22-UV D Swinney 5779 South 900 East Zionsville, petition for a use variance allowance to allow for chiropractic services within an owner's personal residence in the rural, low-density, single-family and two-family residential zoning district, R2. 2018-01-UV was approved at the March 13th, 2018 BZA meeting and expired on March 12th, 2023. So Larry, I think you and I may have been here for that.
I think so.
That approval in 2018. Staff, could we have a report, please?
Yes. The petitioner is requesting a use variance to allow for a chiropractic service within an owner's personal residence. Previously, 2018-01-UV was filed by the petitioner and approved by the BZA in 2018. The petitioner was approved for this within their own residence. While the petition was approved, it was subject to the following conditions. No more than 12 consultations within a day. The day should be defined between 8:30 and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday and 9 to noon on Saturday. No more than 2 consultations within a 1-hour time period, and that the approval for the use shall expire on March 12th, 2023, and is eligible for consideration for approval as a use variance petition in the event that the use is to be extended at that time. Which brings us to today's request. Since the 2018 BZA approval, staff has not received any complaints about the petitioner's business operation out of their residence. Historically, what is being presented goes beyond what a typical home occupation allows, and that is why the use variance is being requested. The current land use is low density residential in the area. The comp plan indicates this area for medium density residential. This use would still, at this location, would still be appropriate in staff's opinion because the property would still be used primarily for residential use, for residential purposes. There's an existing gravel drive to and from the site with a shared private access drive between the 3 owners of Hidden Hollow. The gravel lot can accommodate on the property, can accommodate appropriate amount of parking on the petitioner's property. BZA can implement a sunset or a timeline date, but given that the town has not gotten any complaints, staff would be amenable to approve the use variance correlated only to the petitioner. However, if the plan of operation intensifies, the petitioner would have to amend the petition with the BZA. Also, the BZA reserves the right to amend or rescind the use variance at a public hearing if the town were to receive complaints about the proposed chiropractic location. With that said, staff is favorable with the same commitments that were previously outlined in the 2018 petition. Besides the sunset, as I just discussed. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I was just trying to sort out. So the motion is really for the conditional approval, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
If you like those conditions, yeah.
Okay. And does the petitioner have any issues with the addition, the conditionally approved outline?
No, not at this time. And I'm David Sweeney. I live at 5779 South, 900 East.
So basically this would remove the sunset, so he doesn't really have to come back unless something
Yeah,
changes.
unless it intensifies or if there's a significant, I would say, concern from neighbors.
And even then, that comes back to a hearing, just so in case you go out and do something and make your neighbor mad, he can't chase you off.
Or you decide you want to see 15 patients in a day, or if you have some, then he would need to.
Correct.
Yes, reconsider.
Okay.
So we may have already heard from the petitioner, is that right?
Oh, well, sorry, yes. Did kind of jump ahead there, didn't we?
Well, we'll give him an opportunity
All right.
to say more than just what he said so far. If you would, if once again, state your name and address and then.
Once again, David Sweeney, and I live 5779 South, 900 East. And again, just want to continue what I've been doing. So.
And so I think I'll ask the same question that Mr. Jones just asked, but you're content and
Yes.
fine with the conditions that were established 5 years ago. And those would continue. Should you decide to change any of those, you would have to come back.
Correct.
Fine. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any remonstrators in the room or online who would like to speak to this petition? All right, thank you. I think then we're ready for a motion.
I move the docket 2023-22 UV use variance to allow for the chiropractic services within an owner's personal residence for the property located at 5779 South 900 East Zionsville in the rural, low-density, single-family and two-family residential zoning district R2B, conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and the staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plans, no more than 12 consultation interactions within a day. A day should be defined as 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday and 9 a.m. to noon Saturdays. No more than 2 consultations interactions within a 1-hour time period. Approval of the use variance is only correlated with the petitioner and does not run with the property. The BZA reserves the right to amend or rescind the use variance at a public hearing upon receiving complaints about the proposed chiropractic business at this location. That's it. Correct? Okay.
Second, Mr. Jones. And the second from Mrs. Postaway. Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It's approved. Best of luck to you.
All right, thanks for your time.
Mhm. That concludes all the petitions. I'll just ask, have we gotten, I think they're just all stacked up there now.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Finding of facts, as well as the negative finding of facts from the previous meeting. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Postaway. Would you like to second that, Mr. Jones?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.